Mhm.
Hey, everybody, this is Munson Steed, and we are at a seat at the table, but there's nothing new under the sun. And I am with the Nothing New Under the Sun host, and it is none other than Mrs. Cora Barry, professor extraordinaire, for those who don't know, obviously, First Lady of DC and the Black Nation, I will say, of the Black Nation. Those of you who don't know what that is, you might want to study a little bit of Black nationalism, which is allowed. It is not illegal for all of those of you who think that it's not. It's like they're so proud to say they're in a red state. You might want to join a Black nation of some sort, just so that you understand exactly where you are. Because if you find yourself in some situation where you really don't know what and who you are, you'll be surprised at the outcome. So, for all of us, I want to celebrate and talk and bring to you today the phenomenal sister with superpower, a woman who wins, who supports women who win, and obviously a true storyteller of what our history is. How are you today?
Fine. And how are you? And happy Martin Luther King birthday and all that good stuff.
Well, I think it's Happy Founders Day to you and all the
It is Happy Founders Day to me and all my sorority sisters of the sorority of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated.
Yes, yes. I want to acknowledge that on this particular day. We have a phenomenal holiday, which we haven't always had. And that's why I'm saying on Black nationalism. There are holidays that we should have as a community, celebrated by only us if we choose to. But this was a special day. And we seem not to understand it, even though there are those who only get it off because he died. Like, I don't know that we recognize the only reason you are off is because he gave his life. Is that something?
Well, yeah, it's so much in that is I'm just trying to just to unravel some of it. But you're absolutely right. He did give his life, and I remember actually that day. I was pledging, of course, Delta, and I was in a luncheon for pledgees, and they interrupted in the student lounge. I remember exactly where I was. I remember exactly where I was sitting, and they announced that King had been shot, and that kind of threw everything, a cold water on everything. And then maybe about an hour later, they announced that he was dead in that same spot. So for those of you, which are many of you who were not around in the 60s were a very tumultuous time in this country. As I said, when I used to teach political science, and I still teach it to a certain degree to many people, especially my young people at the Southeast Tennessee Learning Center, that it was an era of movements. It was obviously the Civil Rights Movement. It was the Black Power Movement. It was the women's movement. It was the anti-Vietnam movement. And it was just in general the student unrest movement. And these all were going on simultaneously and not always harmoniously. I mean, there was just not a lot of commonality in approach between, let's say, the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. Not commonality in terms of result, but to some degree, the result goal was not always the same, but it benefited Black people no matter which way you came out on it. And so in real time, people hate it when I say this, but we tend to romanticize our past and say things and acknowledge and praise people for their accomplishments when they have done those things. But what it took to get there, it's a journey. So I'm saying all that to say Martin Luther King was not universally loved, not just from white people. As a matter of fact, there was just as probably as many white people who loved him, let's say, north of Mason-Dixon line, than more than Black people, because where I came from, it was the Black Power movement. And we would turn on the television in the evening and we would see our people being besieged by dogs and cattle prods and all kind water hose and head banging, and they would be singing and praying and kneeling. And I'm in the north. I'm in really actually the heart of the Black Power movement. I was in Oakland, California for a lot of it, and that's the home of the Black Panthers. And so, in the world that I came from, that wasn't acceptable. We believed in, eye for eye, Black power. We weren't the aggressors, but we were definitely the defenders. And so to see that, and you got to understand, also, I was young and radical and crazy and, you know, compromising in my values of Black people. As my person who taught me and mentored me through his teachings was Stokely Carmichael. So I'm saying all that to say that my love for Martin Luther King came on the exact moment I found out that he had been killed. And that in that moment, I knew that something terrible had happened to somebody great who meant so much. I knew it in that moment. I didn't know it prior to that moment. Well, I won't say I didn't know it. I just say I didn't care, because I was, Ron Karenga and Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown, and I could go down the list. Elrich Cleaver, all of them. Those were my leaders, and King was in our time outlier. But it took all of that to get where we are today. Except that after the killing of King in '68 and the end of the '60s era, after Nixon came in, the next 40 years, actually, or 20 years at least, 30 maybe, was to reverse us psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually in terms of our Blackness. We were always expected not to use the word Black or not to use the word race. We either turned into what I would call the minority, people of color. I mean, I can go down the list. And so trying to get a birthday named after a Black man who was assassinated was almost an impossible task because of the political atmosphere. And people often speak about Coretta not being supportive. That's not true. She was supportive, but she wasn't optimistic. She knew the era that we was living in, and to get a national holiday named after her under the likes of what we were dealing with, really the backlash of the '60s, she didn't think that would be possible. And she was right, because it took us getting into the '80s. But Stevie Wonder stepped up near the end, or not near the end, but during the time, wrote a song called Happy Birthday for Martin Luther King, put it on his Hotter Than July album. It was popular. He put it out as a single, released it in '81, '82. We had the march to make King's birthday a national holiday, which I was intimately involved in and active in. And the next year, Ronald Reagan signed it. And that became our national anthem, was the Happy Birthday song. But what happened was everybody got stuck on the bridge, and nobody was listening to the chorus or the lyrics. And so just quite coincidentally, a few months ago, I stumbled into the reality that most of, if not all of the young people, I was saying under 30, but I would say even under 40, do not know what that song is about, do not know who it's about, and does not know why it was written. All they know is it's the Black Happy Birthday song. And to me, that was a travesty. So I just started, one by one, just asking and asking and asking. And the more I realized this is a whole chunk of history that's going out the window and being reduced to a happy birthday song, which, by the way, I have no problem with, as long as you understand the contextual framework in which it comes from.
Well, culturally speaking, the idea is to continue sharing and actually taking some of your language to radicalize yourself, to understand that you recognize that song and share with the young people. So I want to commend you for taking this moment to radicalize Black people, not to just be singers, but to understand you are singing a celebration song about a leader who has given so much more than most are willing to us and to a singer that acknowledged and gave of himself, as Stevie has continued to do throughout his life, since he's still living, and it needs to be acknowledged. So if we don't bring it up, because just like you, had my company-wide meeting, we sang happy birthday, they went into it, nobody knew the chorus, they all knew the song, but they only could sing happy birthday part. And then I told them why the song was created, and then they were like, I didn't know that. And like you said, it was from 45 down. So I think for all of us and those of us who are watching or ever see this video, be sure that you share with someone in a Black nationalistic way, unapologetically, when you play the song, and take the time to share that it is a song about hope, that it is a song about movement, and it is a song about a man, and that we're actually thanking him and thanking the universe for his birth, because we all would not be as free as we are today without the gift that both of them, the inspiration, obviously, for the song, and the song for a man who has given his life for Black people and the Black struggle. And I think for you, but even for you, you have been a Black woman in the movement. And for most Black women, even Coretta had to play a role. And today you guys aren't playing many roles in the backseat, because she clearly played a role till the end. And that's something we're not teaching our daughters and our nieces and our young, and we don't want women to play back anymore. And so I think even the movement at this moment, I think Dr. King and the moment, we have to recognize that, we owe a debt of gratitude to the women like yourself, who, if it wasn't for you, there probably wouldn't be a Marion Barry statue in the city. When people visit a capital, there he will be forever enshrined. There wouldn't be a young mayor who can lean into you and hear whispers of history that people will not share with her, that she cannot see, or a tennis center where it's not made for the elite, but it's made for children to change their minds, to participate in plays, and to know that they are great. So I want to thank you for that, because we don't celebrate even the sisters who are superpowers and who really charge brothers when we not sure where we should go. Whisper in our ear, turn right. And my girlfriend said, turn left. And then the other girl said, sit down, because they're going to cut your head if you don't sit down. So yes, thank you for that. For any of the young people who you actually are speaking to now, what else do you want them to do on this day? How can we best observe this day in a way that unifies the principles of not just Dr. King, but just the principles of a Black movement?
Well, I think this, if you want my opinion, and this could and should be mandated, especially in our culture. I think King's birthday should be celebrated through a effort to always provide service, but also pushing, especially in this area, the value of peace. And we can do that in a lot of ways. I'm talking to the young people here. We're doing a whole peace march. And we got a lot of murders going on. And so, we're back in a thou shalt not kill. We're focusing on Martin Luther King's peaceful resolution of conflict and things that are the legacy of what he was there. It's not just that he lived, he served and he died, but he also taught. So I think education and an effort on our part, not just on that day, but leading into that day and highlighting that day, our efforts towards peace, violence interruption, conflict resolution, patience, love, understanding. All of those things are principles that seem to have disappeared. People don't talk about them anymore. And we got to go back to that, because we've got babies in prison getting shot at 13 years old, trying to break into somebody's car at 4 o'clock in the morning. We got to pull some of that stuff back. We're losing a whole generation of young people to the loss of understanding of who they are, what their role is in this world, and our responsibility to teach them and guide them, correct them. And I think King's Holiday should be a large part of that. That should be the focus. And here actually is we have, but since we do have, as most Black communities have, a street that goes through where I live in Southeast Washington, which would be considered one of the more challenging, but we call it the last frontier, the soul of the city, the last place where you can come and bathe in the culture. So we're trying to hold on to it as long as we can. But we have a big parade, and we're going to have a lot of what I just manifestation of that, peace walks, some of the competing games, walking together in the parade, just promoting the peace and the love and how we can come out of this more in a healing fashion and give some love. We're also going to have a big flatback truck that is going to have a bigger banner of Marion Barry on it, because there's a move to change his name, to change a street in this part of the city to Marion Barry Avenue. And if this street is voted on by the city council, which will be on Tuesday, then Martin Luther King goes through this ward. It is met at the mouth of the ward at Marion Barry Avenue, and it ends at the top of the ward at Malcolm X. So it'll be Malcolm, Marion, and Martin. And so we'll be on a big old flat back truck with that, with the go-go music. And we got a rendition of Happy Birthday that's a go-go rendition. So we're doing the full Monty.
Well, I want to thank you. You continue to give the community conscious. I am fortunate. Most people of this generation need and haven't had the opportunity to meet a Marion Barry or Maynard Jackson or any of the great mayors. And I think there was a tradition of love and misunderstanding and a reduction in the expectation. I think that at the, obviously I was in Atlanta, so, I was there, and Maynard was bigger than life, obviously. But I could hear him say, you deserve at least 40% of every dollar, of every opportunity in the city. And we're going to make Black millionaires. I'm still waiting for new Black mayors and white mayors in Black cities to get back to making Black millionaires. Can you leave us with the idea of why was Marion Barry and these other mayors unapologetic and unafraid to make Black millionaires on an economic movement, as Martin Luther King would have us understand that we deserve a portion of this country's wealth and resources?
Well, I'm going to answer that question with the words of Andy Young. When they were doing the statue for Marion, I called and had a conversation with Andy's secretary, whatever one of those titles, ambassador. And he said to me, Marion was one of the few people who took the lessons of the movement and transferred those lessons into running a metropolis, I think is the word that he used. And one of the fundamental messages, especially as Marion, head of SNCC, was financial empowerment, economic empowerment. That if you want to get out of poverty, if you want to fight against discrimination, you have to be economically sound and strong. And so he brought that into this. And that was, I don't know if most people know his history, but he was a radical. He came in with his dashiki, started a program called Pride Incorporated, who got a lot of what we call returning citizens working and cleaning the streets. At the end of the day, though, when it was all done, he was a Black power person, but he ran for mayor against two traditional people. And people don't know is that the primary people who put Marion in office were white people. They did not vote for him the first time around. Their vote was split between the native sons that were here. Marion was an outlier. He came in from outside. And the white people put him in because they liked his, Washington's a liberal city, so they liked his kind of radicalism. He wasn't the traditional hat in the hand type guy. So they were like, oh, this is what we need. I say within 6 months, they wanted him out, but they had no control for the next the next 25 years. Because within 6 months, he had eliminated the police chief And the fire chief, who were white, he had thrown away the test that determined if you could get in. He had stopped all programs that went without developers who were making a lot of money. He had something that they called 33 and a third. If you made money in the city, 33 and a third had to go to people. He went to Wall Street. I mean, Wall Street came to him. He sent them back. And black people got some of this bond money for the city. And everybody knows about his summer jobs program. People still talk about it on Canes. I think some of mine, some of I got my first summer job. They're older than Marion. He wasn't even, they were. The point is, he understood the importance of economic parity, and that's what he did. And Maynard Jackson was another one. Marion, I would say Maynard and Marion at the top of the class in the whole economic development thing. I would say that, but we also had Gary, we had Hatcher, and we had Carl Stokes out of Cleveland, Ohio. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Well, Harold Washington came a little later, but he came and did what he could do. So, yeah, economic development, economic power, and King understood that, and that's actually what got him killed. He was fine long, he was talking about we shall overcome, but when he started talking about economic parity in this country and Vietnam War and what it was doing to decimate the communities that the resources the most, and it was going to Vietnam, it was over for him.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for coming to A Seat at the Table, Cora Barry, the phenomenal true griot and Black power radical queen extraordinaire. I will end by saying, be unafraid of understanding that you are Black, you should be proud, and that we all should have a movement of peace amongst ourselves as a credo. And I want to thank you for continuing to keep the legacy not only of Marion, but of Stokely. You always call and claim their names. You clearly have not moved away, and clearly you continue to mentor lots of, obviously, young men, but tons of young women, Tamika, Melanie, all those young women, and change their lives and continue to be that peaceful, radical, and sometimes not peaceful, radical that allows us to understand we must keep a flea Black radical in our mind in order to survive and sustain for generations. I'm Munson Steed. We're sitting at A Seat at the Table with my favorite, love to you always, Cora Barry.
Thank you. And